Hi, everyone. I wanted to follow up on the mental health conversations in education. There was just so much I wanted to say, and we didn't really have time to get to everything. So just wanted to provide a little bit more of a backbone to what I've already spoken about in the main presentation where we discussed the assignments and some of the mental health check-ins that I've been doing with the class. So what I'll do is I'll pull up my presentation here so you can follow along, and hopefully this can be relevant to you in your classroom as well. And this is just, and I did show this in my presentation, I always like to start being mindful as professionals as well as for students to be mindful and reflective of, are we taking care of ourselves? And these are, what you see here is the Healthy Mind Platter, which is our optimal functioning. It happens when we are able to check off a lot of these things, right? And some days we might have more or less of these things. So for example, some days we might have less sleep than more, right? So it's not like we can be always full on this plate, but we want to be doing is reflecting on what is missing from this plate or what can we be doing more on. So sleep time, right, is really important for our body, for our mood, optimal brain functioning. And this model, by the way, is based on Daniel Siegel's research, as well as his colleagues on emotion regulation and optimal brain functioning. And then we have over here physical time, which I know during COVID is difficult to do sometimes, as well as during the winter. But it's really important to be mindful of that. And even just getting outside for a quick walk would count towards that focus time. So being able to focus on an activity each day is important to just kind of get our brain thinking. Time in, just being reflective, right? So checking in with ourselves. What are we feeling? What are we thinking about? Being reflective of ourselves and what's going on for us. Oftentimes we go through the day and we're so busy, we don't slow down to really reflect and check in with ourselves. We have downtime and playtime, which is really just being able to give ourselves a break, being able to give our brain a break, right? So downtime is just relaxing, doing something that doesn't require a lot of thinking. Could be reading a book, could be a bubble bath. And playtime, having fun, active fun together. So as we grow older, we sort of forget how to have fun sometimes, right? So even a board game or something engaging that gives you that sense of fun is really important to our optimal functioning, as well as connecting time. And that's a big one, especially during COVID times, during this pandemic. It's important to remember even checking in with each other virtually counts, right? Because we're still connecting together. So as I mentioned before, partly because my class is focused on mindfulness, and partly because I am a mental health practitioner. I'm a psychologist, and so as a mental health practitioner, I do a lot of mindfulness meditation practices with my clients. So I've started doing that with my class. Each class, we engage in a mindfulness practice after we do a check-in, just to ground ourselves and to start our day that way. If you're not familiar in how to lead mindfulness meditation, you can always play. There's a lot of audios out there, and I will provide some resources as well where you can go and play some of those things for the classroom as well to just give them that sense of grounding. So as I mentioned, and I'll go over this quickly because I did mention this in my main presentation, integrating, mindfulness practice with research, right? So we're in academia. We want to reflect. We want to be analytical. We want to teach students how to think about things and how to do some research work as well, but it's also about finding that balance. And so in part because my focus of the class is on mindfulness and mental health, you can't really talk about mindfulness without really practicing it. So it's really important to bring in the subject that you are teaching into practice in some way for students to really experience it. So what I've been doing with them is getting them to choose a personal mindfulness meditation practice. They present about this practice in class, and then they have weekly reflection papers based on their practice, as well as integrating some of the research to what they're experiencing. So they're being reflective, as well as connecting that to what the research and theory is saying. The importance of flexibility with deadlines. So I know we're all going through some difficult times right now. And so I want to be mindful of that. I've given them this assignment and these reflection papers as a way for them to grow and foster their growth. And so they're required to give 5 papers over 7 weeks. So that gives them an opportunity to be flexible. If 1 week is busier, they can sort of submit it in a different week. So I've had students reach out and, making sure they're clarifying, but they're reaching out saying, I'm having a really busy week. Like, that's okay. You can submit in a different week. So it's really good to build in that flexibility with our assignments. And discussions. So taking time to discuss reactions and experiences with mindfulness practice in class and through discussion posts. It builds that space of openness, and you want to build that space of not judging each other, just being supportive. And I know in larger classrooms that could be a little bit trickier to do, but it's nice to have breakout rooms, in those cases where the students can connect together still and still experience some of that discussion piece, and checking in with each other. So for example, one activity that I did, I actually had them in breakout groups for this. We discussed John Kabat-Zinn's 7 attitudes, like attitude foundations for mindfulness-based stress reduction. And what do they mean for them? Can they think of an example when they've experienced these attitudes, and getting them to reflect what might be the easiest and what might be more challenging for them, as well as reflecting on how to teach these ideas in education. As part of my course focuses on educating mindfulness. This is another example of an activity that I had the students engage in. This was conducted during reading week or beyond. So I've sort of didn't put a deadline for this activity, just said, if you want to do during reading week, you can, which some students did, but you can do it at a later time as well. And it's just a mindfulness challenge, a fun way to engage their senses. So my class is on Thursday, so I started on Thursday. You can adapt it for your class. You're welcome to do so, and you can start it at any day. And so we have, as you can see, we have Smelly Thursday. So what smells do you notice in your kitchen, for example? Is there any surprising smells, right? And then getting to generalize to other areas of the house and outside the house for smells. Listening Friday, so stop and listen. What do you hear? And then playing around with that sound. What is the furthest sound? What is the closest sound? And then building on that, I encourage them, okay, so you've kind of listened indoors. Let's see if you can listen outdoors. Is there more sounds outdoors rather than indoors, right? So experimenting with that. We have Looking Monday, so just getting them outside. What do you see? What colors do you notice? Looking in front, above, to the sides, down, right? So we're taking it all in. Touching Tuesday, so do something around your home while focusing on your sense of touch. So what textures do you notice? Temperature, any surprises? So I've given them some examples as well. Even with boring chores like washing dishes, you can still sort of feel the texture of the dishes, against your hands. Notice the temperature of the water. So there's a lot of activities you can engage in for these senses, as well as Tasting Wednesday, where you eat something mindfully. And this is where they kind of engage in all their senses. And I give them some guidance with respect to mindful eating. And we practice that actually within the class as well. So that's another activity that could engage them, engage their senses, and give them a little bit of a grounding for their mental health foundation. So I've had some students, reach out. There's a lot of students that have some mental health challenges that they're going through, and so with these cases, for me, I try very hard not to go into the therapist role because I'm an educator role for them. But I've had quite a few students try to connect and express some of the difficulties they're going through. I still engage in empathetic listening, which is what I do in therapy as well, right? Validating their emotions. I try to provide them with resources, right? So mental health that are available for them, and encourage them that it's important to reach out if they do need that support. And for instructors as well, as an instructor, even though I'm a mental health practitioner, I still work on myself, right? So seeking out training opportunities to increase that awareness of mental health issues. So I know there's a Living Works suicide prevention intervention training course through the university, for example, that I signed up for. And I think it's great that there are efforts to talk about these issues and to build on our understanding of mental health and how to approach it with students. So just a few things to consider as we talk about these mental health issues. Learning disabilities, they're quite common actually with students. I've had a lot of students in my class send me evidence from the Learning Disabilities Center, that they have accommodations, they have learning disabilities. So what do learning disabilities mean? They're a number of neurological disorders which may affect how the students acquire, organize, retain, understand the instructions, the information that I'm giving them. And these disorders really do impact their learning. And the thing with learning disabilities, they're invisible and lifelong, right? So looking at someone, you're not going to be able to tell if they have one or not. And they have ways of hiding them, right? So, they've learned by now, when they get to post-secondary schools, they have learned to adapt, right? But they're still there and they need that support. So as I said, they're very common. They affect about 5 to 10% of Canadians. But they do vary greatly in form and intensity. No two learning disabilities are the same. And also important to know there are more symptoms of anxiety and depression with people who have learning disabilities. So teaching strategies around some of these things that I've discussed around learning disabilities, explicitly discuss their social emotional well-being of students. What does self-care mean for these students? What is manageable? Having those regular mental health check-ins that I've already mentioned is really important. Accompanying with visuals to support their learning. Making information more interactive. So using different mediums can be really, really helpful for students with learning disabilities. And organizing information in manageable chunks, right? So we break down that information instead of giving them everything at once. Making information meaningful. So providing, when you provide that information, try to provide examples or stories that illustrate the point. They will be more likely to stick in their memories. Not requiring synchronous meetings. So again, every student has their, abilities and their availabilities, and flexibility is really important, not just in deadlines, but also whether or not they can make it to the meeting. Some students have difficulties with time management and just are having difficult time coming in for class online. And so, and there's all these distractions online as well that people, especially with ADHD, so attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, they will, or they do tend to have more challenges when it's online, because there are many more distractions online. And at the end of the day, empathy. empathy. At the end of the day, even if you don't really quite know how to approach a person with learning disability, it's really, really important to be empathetic, and to reflect. Maybe you don't understand, but trying to sort of empathize with their situation. As well, another common issue that could come up in class is English second language learners. So, for them, it might be that they have all these ideas, but it's hard for them to express these ideas in English. So my teacher is as foreign to me as I am to him or her. I want to learn how to read and write like other people my age. These are some things that they could be thinking about. I wish I could show more about what I understand so my teacher would know that I can do this. Or the simple things, right? So then written rules of social interactions, understanding the curriculum. So, and some of these individuals could be going through culture shock, right? So really adjusting is a process, adjusting to a new culture, to a new country, even just moving to a new place is an adjustment in itself. So symptoms of culture shock, loneliness, loss of identity, loss of confidence, longing for family, anger, irritability, unwillingness to interact with others. They may be feeling depressed and powerless. There may be insomnia or hostility. So it's really, really important to be aware that these are some things that they could be going through. I'm not saying they are, but they could be. So just to keep an eye out on these things. So some ways we can support these individuals is providing a consistent, safe place, once again, in which they can learn, highlighting values of equity, and continue to do regular check-ins. Breakout groups allow for more informal conversations and connection building with classmates. So even in larger classrooms, we're still able to do a little bit of those breakout groups. Being transparent, open, approachable as an instructor is really important so that the students that are struggling, they're more likely to come to you if they can see that you're open to their issues. Breaking down information once again, so instructions really broken down into manageable steps, using visuals, being aware of the difficulties, so don't assume that they understood, so maybe checking in for their understanding. Again, being flexible in terms of deadlines, and teacher-student relationship matters. So that's an important piece of it. And so when you create that environment of checking in, discussing self-care, providing that open attitude of non-judgmental attitude, that's when we build that relationship between an instructor and a student. I'll quickly note this article because I thought it was very relevant for how I think about teaching and engaging students in teaching. It's by Eager and colleagues, and they talked about the purpose for learning. Many tasks getting where we want to be may be boring or tedious, right? And so they wanted to research this a little bit around what could be motivating for students. And so what they found is that those students with more of a purpose for learning also persisted longer on a boring task rather than giving in to a tempting alternative. And many months later were less likely to drop out of college. They also found that self-transcendent purpose manipulation could increase deeper learning behavior in tedious task review materials and sustain self-regulation over the course of an increasingly boring task, right? So by self-transcendent purpose, it's that intrinsic motivation for learning, right? So we're looking at, as an example here, becoming healthy versus looking physically attractive, right? So where's that motivation? The intrinsic motivation is just to be healthy. So for them, where's that motivation in being there? What is their value, right? So, exploring what are some of their values, just for them to have that reflection piece is really important. And this can lead to, a greater positive attitude, more motivation, and more engagement from the students. So let's focus on grades and more on self-care and mental health emphasis is also something that they've found in their research. And I just want to quickly go through these. These are, so in my course, as I said, I've put in mindfulness as part of practice for developing some of these abilities. And so, as I said, I like to use a lot of visuals with my students as a way to enrich their understanding. So when I talk about mindfulness meditation and what that means, I provide funny visuals to get them engaged and for them to be more likely to remember these things, right? So first one, I know there's no way to do this wrong, but I'm sure I'm not doing it right. So again, this is the emphasis of the really, we try to take a step back. Let's not judge what we're doing. Let's be open-minded and not think about whether this is right or wrong. Am I supposed to stay in the moment or let it go? Stay in the moment as you let it go, right? So the idea behind this one is just for them to understand that we can't just clear our minds, but what we can do is just notice our thoughts and emotions without getting sucked into them and starting to react to them, right? So the idea is we stay present as we notice these thoughts and feelings come up. I need a pedicure. So for this one, it's, the reality is we are going to get distracted from our task. That's how our minds work, and that's okay. So I wanted to normalize that sometimes when we do some of these exercises, we are going to get distracted. Why we shouldn't meditate in bed? Because, one thing that I did emphasize is it is easy to fall asleep, right? And if that's your intention, that's fine. But if you're trying to really be present and practice some of these mindfulness strategies, you want to maybe sit up for them and not lie down in bed. And apparently anything can be done meditatively, or at least that's what my roommate tells me. So I like this one because it really talks about bringing mindfulness into informal practices throughout every day. As I talked about, we could use our senses throughout the day, right? So bringing in mindfulness into boring chores and noticing and being present and seeing if that changes your perspective on these chores, or, not maybe seeing them as boring. Maybe they still are boring, but, being present with what it is. This is what it is, right? And that kind of leads me into formal practice versus informal practice, where we talk about, setting aside time to practice a mindful meditation, which I think is still really important for them to practice that piece and to learn how it works. But also just as important to have that informal practice of bringing awareness into activities that we might already be doing. So again, in terms of body positions during mindful meditation, while I talk about some postures and what could be helpful for them in terms of sitting positions and where our gaze should be. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So as I was saying, at the end of the day, you can sit wherever and however you're comfortable. I want to be mindful of that, because when we think about where the students could be coming from, and I try to kind of keep at the back of my mind that trauma-informed perspective as well, in terms of the fact that, sometimes we don't want to close our eyes. It might not feel safe. It might not feel comfortable to us. Sometimes certain postures are not right for us, right? So doing what feels right for us is really important. And again, as I mentioned, these are some resources for guided mindful meditations that you can access for free. There's a lot out there, a lot of great stuff out there. So these are some of the ones that I usually go to with students as well. And I'm just going to read this quote out loud. Really, I think sums it up. Once you felt negative emotions, acknowledge their existence and let go of the tendency to explain or get rid of them. They're much more likely to vanish naturally, like the mist in a spring morning, right? So coming back to that idea of not pushing anything away, just noticing and being mindful and present of what we might be experiencing. And I'd like to end with a poem. I really like this poem. I think it speaks to a lot of, challenges that we might be feeling or experiencing. So I'll just read that through for you. So sometimes the world feels inhospitable. You feel all the ways that you and it don't fit. You see what's missing, how it all could be different. You feel as if you weren't meant for the world, or the world wasn't meant for you. As if the world is the way it is and your discomfort with it a problem. So you get timid, you get quiet about what you see. What if this? What if you're meant to feel the world is inhospitable, unfriendly, off track, in just the particular ways that you do? The world has a U-shaped hole in it. It is missing what you see. It lacks what you know. And so you were called into being to see the gap, to feel the pain of it, and to fill it. Filling it is stepping into the center of the crowd, into a clearing, and saying, here, my friends, is the future. You don't have to do it all, but you do have to speak it. You have to tell your slice of the truth. You do have to walk toward it with your choices, with your own being, the roughness of the world, the off-trackness, the folly that you see. These are the most precious gifts you will receive in this lifetime. They are not here to distance you from the world, but to guide you to your contribution to it. The world was made with a U-shaped hole in it. In that way, you are important. In that way, you are here to make the world. In that way, you are called. So this is a poem by Tara Moore. I hope you've enjoyed this talk. I hope it made sense to you. And at the end of the day, normalizing it. Today, I will live in the moment, unless the moment is unpleasant, in which case I will eat a cookie, giving ourselves a break, right? Some days are going to be trickier than others, and normalizing that that's okay is really important. So I hope this was a helpful presentation for you guys, gave you some ideas. I know with larger classrooms, it gets a little bit trickier. I think, this conversation needs to happen more. I think that we need to bring in more students to hear their voices and what they think might be helpful. And I hope we'll get to connect soon. Take care, everyone.